All right, so I'm going to be able to see my screen here. So I have Moodle up first. So just a couple things reminder wise. So I kind of updated my office hours because it was weird and they didn't really make sense in terms of like the links and stuff. So just so you know, there is a link here that says my virtual office. And if you look at the office hours, both on the syllabus and also in Moodle here, you can see that I updated them slightly. So like, obviously if you want to talk to me, I'll be in a few minutes or I'll stay after class. That's totally fine. Then we just stay on the class link and we can talk then. But if you sort of want to meet outside of that, if you take a look here, I just updated it a little bit more. So for instance, for us, obviously right after class, you just stay on the same class Zoom link. Tuesday and Thursdays from 10:30 to 11:30. There's that virtual office link. You can just click on there and I should be there. There's definitely a chance that I forget to turn it on. So just shoot me an email then and just say, hey, can I talk to you or whatever, okay? But so anyway, updated that way. Same thing for Monday and Wednesday from 10 to 11. You can use that virtual office link that's in Moodle, all right? Does anyone have any questions about that? No? Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys that. It does look like just about everyone completed the syllabus quiz. However, it looks, when I just look now, and I have to still read through them, once I read your open-ended, I'll put grades, I'll put a point value in for that, and then you'll see your grade for it. I mean, I'm assuming everyone's gonna, as long as you did it, no matter what, you're gonna get 100, okay? But so that's why you don't really see that grade yet, okay? So somebody had asked about that, so I just want to make sure I told everyone that. But it looks like there might be one person who didn't complete the quiz. So if you didn't complete that quiz, please stay on right after we're finished with class so that I can reopen it for you, okay? But otherwise, it looks like, it's just weird because it looks like 34 people did it, but then when I look closer, it looks like there's one person missing. So anyway, if you didn't complete the quiz, please stay on and let me know. All right, so the other thing is, I mentioned these group tutoring sessions when we talked about the syllabus on Tuesday. They will be set up for next week, okay? So you guys can just click here and enter into that group tutoring session from Moodle, all right? And Katie is the group tutor, she'll be there. So I may have her, if she's available, just kind of quickly log on Tuesday just to introduce herself during our class, okay? Remember, you're required to at least stop in for like a half an hour or so once a week. You can go over homework with her. You can do practice questions, right? Like for every chapter, just so you guys know, there's like a chapter review. So if you click on that, it's like the summary, and also there's some practice questions there, okay? So any of those things, like I said, you can do the homework questions with her. You could do a lab assignment, right? Or ask her questions about anything. So she's really there to help you. So I would take advantage, okay? If towards the middle of the semester, I'll debate about this, but I may say if at midterm you have an A, then you're not necessarily required to go, okay? But like I said, it's nice to have a mix of students there, and you guys can help each other out there as well, all right? So we'll see how that goes, but I just want to let you know that that's starting next week. It's scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday, all right? Any questions about that, guys? No? Okay. All right, so like I said, let's review a little bit did I hit record? I thought I hit record. It is, okay. We're gonna review a little bit of chapter 1 quickly because again, that whole recorded lecture is there, so please listen to it. And remember one other thing I didn't mention. When you're listening to that recorded lecture, you should be taking notes in the review sheet, right? So the exam 1 review sheet, if I could find it. One second. It's here, okay? So in the week, so again, I think some people, maybe it was in my other class, but might have had trouble finding things. So for the review sheets, they're always in the week when we're taking the exam, okay? And remember that these collapse. So if you're on Moodle and all of your weeks are collapsed, you're not gonna see anything. So you have to hit this arrow to open up the week, okay? And you'll find the review sheet there. So good idea to have the review sheet out with you while you're listening to the recorded lecture. Ultimately, I'm going to ask you to hand in or submit that review sheet right before the exam. So I won't do it for every chapter separately. I'll just do it all at once before that one exam. All right. I think I might've told you guys this on Tuesday. I just wanted to remind you. So if you take a look here again, remember it's an outline. you then will fill in the details. So this is something, same thing that you can do with the group tutor with Katie. Okay, you can bring your review sheet and maybe just kind of go over that as well. All right. So with that said, let's do a little bit of just, again, quick review of chapter 1, intro chapter. Okay. The first part of it starts, it talks about levels of biological organization, right? So for instance, for here, if you're writing your notes, you want to add all those levels in and maybe a little bit of a description that's there. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's go to that lecture and just open that up, okay? So, and also too, there's some questions to think about here that are written down here. So kind of think about those as you're going through this chapter. Again, this is introduction, really sort of broad concepts that are gonna, you know, sort of, that are gonna come up as we go through the semester. All right, so the first thing that I mentioned, well, so also the beginning of the chapter goes through these characteristics of life, right? And I believe there's 7 of them. So make sure you know those, okay? I'll ask you them. I think it's a homework question. Make sure you know them, not only just memorizing them, but what we mean by those, okay? So if we say that we're saying living systems are organized or living organisms are organized, we're really talking about these levels of organization, okay? So again, on that outline, that review sheet, that's sort of the first thing that's there. So you should write it all out, right? I kind of abbreviated it, but you want to fill in those details, okay? Because sometimes students have questions in terms of like, what the heck am I supposed to do with that review sheet? Fill in the details, okay? It's really just an outline, and you can do it on a separate sheet of paper if you want as well. All right, so just to review this, we start off smallest, right? Moving up both sort of in complexity and in size, right? So if we talk about an atom, smallest unit of an element, okay? From atom, next step up is a molecule, okay? Many of you guys probably already know most of this, right? So if we talk about a molecule, it's 2 or more atoms, right? Of the same or of different elements, okay? So again, these are other things that you can write into your review sheet, a description or a sort of a definition of each of these levels, right? So I'm just going through this to give you guys an example. Cell, okay? So again, I told you this on Tuesday, this semester is really focused on the cell. The cell is the structural and functional unit of all living things. So you got to talk about what happens in the cell that then dictates how that organism can function, right? So it's really important to understand what's going on there. So what this is showing you here is right, different types of cells. So showing you a nerve cell or a neuron, and then a plant cell. So where do you find neurons? Somebody can jump in. Where do you find neurons?
Inside the cell?
So neurons are nerve cells, right, themselves. So where in the body do you find them? What do you think?
The nervous system.
Okay, and so what's an organ of the nervous system?
The brain.
Correct. So you find them in the brain and the spinal cord, right? Also in nerves, because some of them extend out into the periphery as well, but right. So what about, so obviously we know a plant cell, a nerve cell, different. What about some other types of cells that are in the human body? What other types of cells can you think of? Specific cell types.
Muscle cells.
Blood cells. Blood cells.
What'd you say?
Blood cells.
Blood cells. Good. What else?
Muscle cells.
Yep. Thank you. Perfect. Muscle cells, blood cells. What's another one?
Sperm cells.
Say it louder.
Sperm cells.
Okay, good. What else?
Sperm cells.
So another one. What other types of cells? One more. I don't know, but there's many more, but give me one more.
Stem cells.
Say it louder. Sorry.
Stem cells.
Stem cells. Good. That's a good one. I like that. All right. So what makes cells, so these different cell types that you guys mentioned, what makes them different?
Their functions.
Different, yeah, they're different part of the
Their
body.
structure.
They're
Yeah.
different body. They have different structures. They have different functions. Good. But why or how? How do they have, what enables them to have a different structure or a different function?
They have organelles.
Yep. Well, yeah. Okay. So they could have slightly different organelles, but what really makes them different?
They're used in different ways. So some of them might use for nutrients. Some might use for fat. They're used in different ways, I guess.
Okay. You're getting, yep.
They have a nucleus.
All of them do, right? So-
Their location.
Okay, yes, that's true. Their location's different. So if you think about the cell itself, right? So if you think about a nerve cell, right, or a neuron in the brain versus a muscle cell or a heart muscle cell specifically, what makes those? So yes, they're different. They are different in structure. They're different in function. But why? They all have the same DNA, right? In the nucleus is the same DNA. So how come they can be so different? Anyone know?
Gene activation.
Okay, good. Gene expression, right? Meaning what types of, so perfect, right? What types of proteins they make. Okay, so that's kind of what I always kind of go through this because it's something to think about. In all of your cells in the body, it's the same DNA, right? In that nucleus. But what makes them different is the proteins that they express. That then allows them to have a different structure or a different function, okay? And so that's why it's so important to really learn about the function of the cell, specifically, about things like transcription and translation, which we'll learn about, and you guys probably have heard of those terms before. All right, so a little more on that. You don't need to know all that stuff right now, but just something to kind of, again, keep in mind, okay? So now we're on the cellular level. If we go up one more level, we talk about tissues. So nervous tissue, it lists there, and then it's showing you some plant tissue. What are some other tissues in your body?
Bone tissue.
Yep, good. Bone's a tissue, perfect.
Skin
Is it
tissue.
Saphir, go ahead.
Skin tissue.
Okay, good. What
Yeah.
else?
Is there fat tissue?
Yep, fat, that's a tissue. Yep,
Muscle,
say it again.
muscle,
Muscle, yep.
Nervous tissue.
Yep, nervous tissue, right? So we have all these different tissues. And so when we talk about different tissue types, again, they have different functions, they have different locations, right? And they're made up of specific cells, okay? All right, then we move up from there. We're gonna talk about organs, right? So if we're talking about a neuron, then nervous tissue, then our organ, the brain, right? If you look at the plant, because remember plants are living things too, we have leaf tissue, and then we're showing you the leaf, right? Which is the organ. So again, name some organs.
Kidney,
The heart.
Good. Heart.
liver,
Liver.
pancreas,
Lungs.
Good. So bones aren't, or did you say bones? Who said that? Brad?
I said lungs.
Lungs. Thank you. See, I can't hear. You got it. Lungs.
Kidneys?
Kidneys. Good. Yeah. So, all right. So these are all organs. And then if we move up from organs, what's next on our little hierarchy here, guys? What's the next one?
Organism.
Not yet.
Um,
System.
Yep.
System.
Oh, what happened? I went off of here. Organ system, right? All right, good. And then organism. Okay, I think you guys get the gist here, so I'll just kind of go through. Again, if you need more clarification on this, just listen to the recorded lecture or listen to it again. Ask me whatever you need to do, right? So organism, then we can talk about population, which these are organisms of the same species that are in the same area. So when you talk about a population, same species, okay? Then if you move up into community, you have interacting populations within that area. So not all the same species. And then ecosystem, and finally biosphere, okay? So we should know this hierarchy, okay? So like I said, on that review sheet, fill in all the details that we just went through, okay? And that's true of the rest of that review sheet as well. And so the first part of this chapter, right, talks about characteristics of life. That one that we were just talking about was life is organized, okay? So anyway, you can then move through the rest of these characteristics of life, right? Life requires materials and energy, okay? This is just showing you, again, if you think about an ecosystem and how everything sort of fits together, right? And how everything affects the other. You can kind of take a look here. I think it's kind of important to understand what's going on in this figure. Oh, by the way, sometimes on the exam, I'll like put up a figure like this and maybe ask you questions about it, right? Because again, it's not about memorizing. Who cares about memorizing? You can look up anything, anytime that you want on your phone, right? It's really about understanding, okay? So, so something like this to really understand what's going on here, right? So in terms of those decomposers in the soil down there, what do those guys do? Why are they important to the ecosystem, I guess? Could be some kind of question that I might ask you. How might you answer that? Somebody want to?
They probably provide nutrients. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, say it louder.
I said they probably provide nutrients that I don't know how to say, but like the animals above or the producers above can't provide down there. So they probably provide nutrients there where the soil is.
Yep. And so how do they provide those nutrients? Anyone know? Right. Well, they're decomposers, right? So they are going to break down. So they're going to break down larger organic material and larger organic molecules, right? So then it's available as nutrients for everything else, right? For those plants that are growing here, and then animals can eat the plants and what have you. So decomposers are things like fungi, even bacteria, they're super, super important to the environment and to the ecosystem, okay? So anyway, you know, make sure if I show you a figure like this, you really kind of can understand. It's not about memorizing, it's about understanding. So who was that told me about the nutrients? Let me see, let me flip my.
It was me, Vanessa.
Vanessa, right? So like on an exam, if you told me that and you kind of explain that a little bit, right, I'm going to take that because that's true, right? So it's really not about memorizing or getting things exactly right. It's about just kind of reasoning through, okay? So good. All right, so let's just move on. Let me see if there's a couple other things. So again, we're just continuing with these characteristics of life. Homeostasis, big one, right? Living organisms respond to stimuli. Obviously, living organisms need to have the ability to reproduce and develop. Otherwise, there's not going to be too many living organisms around. And then living organisms have adaptations. So if you think about, you know, and we talk more about adaptations and evolution, like I said, next semester or towards the end of this semester, but it's important to kind of bring that up now, just to kind of know the overarching sort of concepts, I guess, okay? So, you know, I guess I usually in class, I'll ask you guys, like, can you think of a certain adaptation that an animal has or something like that, or a plant, anything? Give me an example, I guess, of something that might come to your mind.
Fish have gills.
Okay, good. Fish have gills that give them the ability to basically extract oxygen from the water, right? Okay. What else? Anyone can think of another one? I'll put this picture up.
Cactus.
Okay, what's the adaptation?
It has to adapt to no water.
Okay, good, right? So it's going to have certain characteristics that allow it to be able to survive in that environment where it's super dry, right? And actually, one of the adaptations is actually a sort of change or an alteration in how it does photosynthesis. It's different than other plants that live in wetter environments. What about this picture here? What is this showing you? What's this adaptation?
To the weather, to the cold weather.
Okay. And so, go ahead.
I was gonna say change in climate because it looks like it's melting when it should be, everything should be kind of frozen over there.
All right, but if you look at these penguins, what's an adaptation that they have to enable them to survive in that environment that you guys are just describing?
Well, their stomachs.
Yeah, so they're showing them on their stomachs. What are we showing here? What are they doing?
They travel, I guess.
Yeah, who said sliding? They're sliding, right?
I did.
Yeah. They're sliding on the ice. Why? They have short little tiny little stubby little, I don't even want to call them legs, right? So they can't walk very fast. So this is a behavioral kind of physical adaptation where they can slide on that ice so they can move a lot faster, right? Then they obviously have other adaptations to be able to live in that cold environment as well, right? So that's just an example. Again, you guys came up with other examples and I'm sure you can think of some more as well, okay? All right. Okay, so the next part of the chapter talks a little bit about evolution. Again, we're not getting into really a lot of detail here. It's really just an introduction, okay? So mentions Charles Darwin. We talk a whole lot about Charles Darwin at the end of the semester, right? But important to be familiar with the term of natural selection, right? And again, I go through this in the recorded lecture, so I don't want to like go through it all again. That's why I recorded the lecture. So please make sure you listen to them. But if you think about natural selection, I mean, obviously it goes along with sort of the adaptations that we were talking about before. How would you describe natural selection? I guess we can at least take a little bit of time, but then we'll move on. What would be your, I guess, in your own words, how would you describe or define natural selection?
Organism with the best suited genes survives.
Good. Good. I mean, that's a big one, right? So the organism that is most fit or best suited for the environment, right? Which obviously that's dictated by what genes and genetic information that he has is going to be the one that survives, right? And that's really it. I mean, and again, the natural part of selection, though, if you take this sort of term literally, we're talking about the environment selecting for specific traits, right? So the organism already has a set of genes in place in a certain set of characteristics. It then will survive if it is best suited for that environment, okay? So the environment's not going to make genetic changes or anything like that. The genetic changes happen by chance, right? And then the environment is selecting for those that are most or best fit, if that makes sense, okay? So kind of think about that, and we'll talk about that more, but understand that, again, the genetic information, the genetic changes are there already. The environment is selecting for those, not creating genetic change, okay? So that's why we say natural selection. The example that I give, or even the book gives, is with plants, well, these certain leaves or certain species of plants that basically started to produce these leaves with these hairs on it, right? And that then allowed, the deer then didn't eat it, right? So we're talking about something that's good for the plant here. So the plant had adapted, right? And started to produce these leaves with hairs. And again, at one point though, this one hairy leaf here was just by chance, that one plant that produced those leaves. That was some sort of mutation that caused that to happen. But then over time, right, the environment sort of selected for that species because that gave it an advantage, right? It was best suited for its environment because the deer weren't able to eat it. Okay, so that gives an example of natural selection. Again, there's lots of examples that we can go through, and I'm sure you guys can come up with a couple yourselves. Any questions about that, guys? All right. So then this is just showing you a basic evolutionary tree. Again, we're not gonna go through like details. Now, second semester, we fill in a whole bunch of details. We talk about all sorts of different protists, different plants, different fungi, different animals, right? Different classes there, but we're not gonna worry about that now, but we wanna know this right now, right? So if we look at these three beige boxes here, eukarya, archaea, and bacteria, what do we call those? What's the group, kind of the grouping for those three large groups? What do you call those?
Domains.
Yep, good. Three main domains, right? And the three domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. And then if you look at eukarya here, it's then broken down, right, into these groups here. So these are then kingdoms, right? And then you can, again, you go smaller, in smaller groups from there. So like protists, like I said, is broken down into smaller groups, plants as well, okay? So we just, for right now, want to be familiar with this, okay? And so, you know, I think I talked a little bit about like taxonomy, right? Which is basically the discipline of biology that identifies and names organisms, right? And puts them into these groups. And it's ever changing, just so you know. So like when I took biology, I won't tell you when, there wasn't three main domains, right? It was categorized differently, okay? So it's always changing as we learn more about the species that we have and also as we discover new species, okay? So Another thing we should be familiar with is this, right? I just mentioned this, the domain, right, and the kingdoms, and then you get more specific and smaller groups as you move down here. So species, most specific, right, or least inclusive is the way we're writing it here. Domain, most inclusive, meaning there's the highest number or the largest number of organisms in there, right? The biggest category to species, the smallest, okay? So we should be familiar with this order here, right? And if you guys take an example here, this is just showing you a human versus corn, right? If we look, domain over here, human and corn are both eukaryotes, right? They're members of domain eukarya. What does it mean to be a eukaryote, guys? Somebody tell me that. Eukaryote versus a prokaryote. Even just one thing, just give me like one characteristic of a eukaryotic cell or a eukaryote versus a prokaryote. What's the difference? One difference.
Nucleus.
Thank you. A membrane-bound nucleus, right, in eukaryotes. And also there's many other specialized membrane-bound organelles that prokaryotes don't have. They're also larger, right, a little more complex. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but you guys should know the difference between a prokaryote and a eukaryote. It comes up again when we get to chapter 4 and we talk specifically about the cell, okay? So just kind of just some general differences right now. All right, so then anyway, if you go, now we're getting more specific as we move down, right? Kingdom, human is part of the animal kingdom, obviously, corn, part of the plant, and you can kind of see as you go down here, phylum, class, order, family, right? Genus, Homo, species, is Homo sapiens, okay? So anyway, you don't need to, I'm not gonna ask you to memorize like every single phylum, class, order of the human or of the corn. This is meant to be illustrative, just to give you an example, okay? But we should know this in terms of how these categories are arranged, all right? Does anyone have questions about that? All right. Okay, so again, this is just giving you some characteristics of the 3 domains, archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. We already kind of went over that. We did this already as well, okay? The last part of this chapter is about the scientific method, okay? And so what we're gonna do now is what I said, we're gonna do this scientific method activity, all right? So again, if you didn't listen to a recorded lecture, please do, because there's probably a decent amount of explanation that I go through with this part. I don't want to spend all the time now because I want to give us time to be able to do the breakout rooms and work on that scientific method activity, okay? Basically, you're going to divide that scientific method into observation, developing a hypothesis, right? Predictions and experiments, and then data collection, and then making some sort of conclusion from there, all right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the assignment, and then my example is there so you guys can kind of get an idea of that. So like I said, please make sure you listen to, because this is again something that like I could ask you on an exam to say, hey, you know, here's an observation or two, give me a hypothesis, and then give me an experiment that you could test, right? It's about, again, understanding, not really memorizing this stuff, okay? This is a little, I go through that. I wouldn't like, if this confuses you, just pass it by. It's not like a big deal. This isn't something that I would be like, sort of examining very closely. It's a little confusing the way it's presented. Okay. So just make sure you sort of can understand how this is broken down in terms of what an observation is, what a hypothesis is. Okay. All right. So let me again show you, see if there was anything else I wanted to mention. I mean, I think this example is nice. So there's a couple nice examples, like I said. So I again, please listen to the recorded lecture because I go through these examples, okay? I'm not gonna go through it again because it's already there. So just pop in, even if there's certain parts you fast forward through the lecture, I don't really care, but make sure you get the explanation for the things that you need, okay guys? And then if there's questions about it, you know, you can ask me and I can go through it. But for now, I'm just gonna kind of leave this. And then, like I said, on like next week, if you want me to clarify a little bit more, I'm more than happy to, but I want to move on to the activity so that we have enough time. All right. Any questions before I move on though? All right. Okay, so let me just minimize this. Remember, there's the review sheet, just to remind you guys about that. And where's my, here it is. Okay. Can you get out of my way? Okay, so this is what you guys are going to work on now in groups, okay? So the assignment is down here. This is my example. So let me just talk to you a little bit about my example here. Right, so you're gonna think of a topic, right, or a problem that's interesting to you, anything in science and medicine, okay? You're gonna write down 2 to 3 observations about that topic, okay? And it can be anything. It can be like really complex or really simple, doesn't matter. And then you're gonna write down a hypothesis, okay? So it says here, it's a simple statement about what you believe is happening, and it's something that's testable. It's like 1 sentence, super simple, okay? And then you'll just describe your experiment briefly in terms of how you're gonna test that hypothesis, okay? So there's a decent amount to do here. That's why I wanna get you guys started. I always do this in class and I go over to the groups and talk to you. So that's what we're gonna do, but we're gonna do it electronically. All right, so let me just go through my examples, then I'm gonna break you guys out into groups. So I'll randomly break you out into breakout rooms. You guys will all unmute yourselves and you're gonna talk about this. So each person should have this file open and be writing stuff in now when you talk to each other. And as I said, you're gonna have to submit this by class time on Tuesday, and you all within that same group can submit the same thing. I'm fine with that, okay? So in terms of my example here, right? So I picked my topic as post-traumatic stress disorder, right? PTSD. I told you guys that I work as a neuroscientist, and so that's one of the things that we study in animal models, actually, okay? And so here's some observations. And again, your observations can come from like, I don't know, you observing something outside, like in your yard with trees or animals, that's fine. It could be something that you read about or that you heard about, anything like that, okay? So I have here patients who have PTSD also have chronic pain, okay? So we call that comorbidity, right? That you see a lot, you see this linkage of chronic pain and post-traumatic stress disorder, okay? So just an observation. Many of these PTSD patients are treated with opiate drugs. They're treated with opiate drugs to relieve that chronic pain, okay? Opiate drugs like morphine, right? And I kind of told you guys our final project will involve opiates. At least I'll probably stick with that same topic because it's pretty interesting, okay? All right, so those are my 2 observations, right? So now I'm gonna come up with a hypothesis that I wanna test doing some experiments. So I said, here, chronic opiate treatment leads to the development of PTSD symptoms, okay? So again, the hypothesis is just a statement. That's it, it's what you think, okay? And then you're gonna test it. So my experiment here, I say treat animals with opiates, right? Like morphine, you can inject animals with morphine, and then test them behaviorally to see if they display more PTSD-like symptoms, right? Compared to control animals. So there are behavioral tests that you can do with animals that can test things like anxiety and things like that. It's a little more involved that we need to get into, but there are behavioral tests to do things like this, okay? I said here, one behavior that can be tested is something called avoidance behavior. So avoidance behavior is something that you see in anxiety disorders, right? So if you think about, you know, just in people, if you're anxious about something, you have anxiety about some sort of event, you may then start to avoid situations that might remind you of that event. And then eventually that might interfere with your daily life, right? And so then that can really become problematic. And so anyway, we can test that type of behavior in animals, right? So obviously my example might be a little more involved than yours, and that's fine, but I just wanted to give you guys an example. The big thing is, remember, the hypothesis is just simply a statement. You know, like if you go back to that like deer in the leaf example, it could just be that you noticed, your hypothesis could just be after some observations that the leaves with the deer don't eat the leaves or don't eat the trees that have hairy leaves, right? Like that's the hypothesis, that's all it is. It's super simple, okay? But it has to be able to be tested by some sort of experiment. All right, does anyone have any questions? So you all should have this up on your screen so that you guys can work on this together. when I come to your group, I will ask one of you to share your screen and show me what you've kind of worked on, okay? And then ask you. And it's okay if like you're stuck somewhere. I don't care about where you're at. So I'm doing this for a couple reasons. One, to test out technology, because we're going to probably use these breakout rooms. We have to be able to share our screens, okay? So I'm checking that, and I also want to be able to help you out with this if you need it, all right? So questions before we start?
Oh, right here.
Yeah.
What about if I really don't need a like experiment about something? If it's just like it just makes sense, like it's really like that. Like I don't even have to like do my research about it. I really don't know if you could understand what I'm trying to.
Well, then you got to think of another example, right? You want to think of some kind of problem that's going to require some sort of experiment. And just so you know, there's probably nothing that we don't need to experiment. Tell me what you're thinking.
I don't know. I just wanted to ask, but I'm thinking about labor.
Okay, so you got to kind of think about something related to that. That's like some sort of problem, right? I don't know. So that's fine. That's really general. Then think about, again, something that like you've heard about or something like that, that there's some sort of issue surrounding that. And then think about some way in which you could try to figure some more information out about it, right?
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else have a question?
So we can just.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. All right. What if you like already did the sheet and then submitted it?
So that's cool. You're ahead of the game, but you got to help your group out then. You don't have to tell them, but you can be there and kind of like give them whatever. All right.
Okay.
Thanks. All right. Who else? Somebody else had a question.
We can write on it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You mean like
Okay.
you print it out? That's fine.
Okay.
But yeah, but when you submit it, you're going to have to type it up in here. So like when you guys are doing the assignment, you're typing in here your answers, and then you're going to submit that completed assignment, this completed Word document. Every single person is going to do that. And like I said, you guys it can be similar between group members, but everyone's going to submit it that way. Question?
I was about to ask that question. That means that the same topic that the whole group is talking about, for submission, we could submit the same observation and the same topic, right?
Correct. For this assignment, you can, yes. Amongst group members, it can be the same submission, but every single person needs to do it on their own. Okay? So like I said, you're going to be completing this Word document. Guys, when you submit this, you don't submit a Google Doc. Now, even if you do it in Google Docs, that's fine. You have to download it and make it a PDF before you submit it to Moodle. Sometimes Google Docs are fine, but a lot of times it makes problems. Okay, so for Moodle, when you're submitting homework or anything like this, either a Word document or a PDF. Do not submit a Google Doc, because what ends up happening, it becomes like an RTF file and I can't open it. Okay, so I just want to kind of mention that, and probably people will still do it, and I'll remind you, if it keeps happening, I'm just going to give you a 0, because when I'm grading 34 papers, if it just becomes such a pain in the butt, because I have to like tell you, resubmit it and then go back. So just try to remember that, PDF or Word document. Okay. All right, guys. So what I'm going to do, you're going to hang out. It's going to automatically put you in breakout rooms. I think it asks you to enter the room. You may have to click something, and then I'll come and visit your rooms and see what's going on. All right. So everyone should have that document open and should be working on it. So 1 second, let me stop my share, and then we're going to go from there. All right, so just hang out. Wait, there's so many of you guys. All right, it's going.